cities that you have you're headquartered in, and talk a little bit about urban development in Istanbul, Moscow, Berlin. Because why? These cities, starting in, let's say, the 1990s, all of a sudden went from, this kind of backwater places, and then there was this tremendous growth, and there was a kind of energy from economic forces. But it took architecture some time to catch up to this economic energy. So first, maybe Gokhan talk a little bit about Istanbul from the 1990s on, and from your initial work in public work for things like public parks and bathrooms and fish markets. What do you see as Istanbul from the 1990s to present? And then maybe also, since you've been going there recently, talk a little about how that you see it's connected to Moscow and what you've seen there.
Actually, if you compare the Moscow and Istanbul, first of all, the Moscow is a green city. There are amazing green everywhere, and then the Sergei designed some landscape park for Moscow, right?
Another Sergei, chief architect.
And also, the Istanbul is there are not enough green park. We suffer about that, but we have a lot water everywhere. It's a totally different two cities. Moscow is, I think, 600 years old, maybe more.
Moscow is 850. 850. 860, I think. 860.
Yeah, the Istanbul 12,000.
Yes.
And then it's so old city, and then the old city, and also the so new emerging states. Now the megapole.
Can you speak about that emergingness from the 90s? You were a witness to this emergence.
Yeah,
what happened?
Suddenly grew up, suddenly expanded, and it's like a circle, everywhere. It's not only one way. And then Istanbul lost the green areas.
So the urban development is about growth, buildings, and loss of green areas in Istanbul.
Exactly. First of all, the Moscow has a chance about that. It's a fantastic green city, surrounded with fantastic forests, and city also well planned. But Istanbul, it's a no plan, and then the free about that. You can do anything. The important thing, the next 10 years, I think Istanbul will be shrink, because Istanbul has many function programs, the finance, media, and also the education, and the industry, and also the airports. There's one greatest airport will come to Istanbul. Istanbul has to be shrink in 10 years.
Sergei, you are an intermittent visitor to Istanbul. How do you see, for example, Gokhan goes to Moscow and sees it as very green. In terms of your perspective, this development of the last, you've been coming here, let's say 10 years, 15 years, how do you see this nature of urban development?
Well, I've never thought about this point, how Istanbul green, because I'm growing up also in the city, Petersburg is similar green as Istanbul. It's also very big, and comparing quite dense. It is not so spontaneous maybe as Istanbul, and also much younger. It is only 300 years old, a little more 315 years old. But in any case, I wouldn't miss here a lot of greenery. Let's say I wouldn't miss it. Of course, I think it's a great idea and great chance for Moscow to get these new places like Zaryadye, my former partner and now chief architect of Moscow, Sergei Tchoban, lead it in the last years, and it became really great green space, green lung of Moscow. But in any case, for me, the city, every city is first of all the question of character.
Right.
I like to recognize the city. If I come in, I like to recognize the character of the city. And Istanbul has this very strong character of mix of different areas, but also surface of the streets and town parts, and this very important iconic mosques, different with enormous quality of surface, enormous quality of details. What making for me the character of the city. And to compare with Moscow, I would say it is much more similar as different between Moscow and Istanbul, because Moscow is also very like a composition of layers. Of course, it's much younger, but still in this younger time, Moscow walked through very different types of history. Provincial town, very important capital of Soviet town, very important capital of early capitalistic town, let's say wild capitalistic towns, and now coming to smooth regulation, let's say, to clever regulation with a lot of green spaces, with new green spaces, with a position of regulation of density somewhere. But I think there are a lot of similarity in it. And the second
Also
question,
Berlin, maybe.
Berlin is different. Berlin is different because Berlin tries to regulate much more. Much more as Istanbul, is much more as Moscow. Berlin tried really to regulate in the height, in the quality of blocks, in the quality of facades, closed and open gaps of the facades. Tried to regulate a lot.
At the urban design level?
Yeah, already on the level of urban design. So Petersburg for me and Berlin are more sisters and or brothers. In German, town is woman, like a word. And so they are more sisters, and Moscow and Istanbul are also very much like
If we
brothers.
look at these three case scenarios, these are kind of major Eurasian cities, Berlin, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Istanbul. But there's also other Eurasian cities to the east of these cities in both Central Asia, Central Russia. What kind of, when you look eastwards, further eastwards, what kind of examples from these cities do you think can be used in the development of these newer cities in places like Uzbekistan and also in Kazakhstan, and even further eastward? I mean, these cities will grow and will need to develop. What aspects of the Istanbul, Moscow, Berlin case do you think that would be good for them in terms of character, for example? Or what kind of character should they have? Should they look Central Asian, for example?
And actually, first of all, I think the modernist idea that ruined the old cities and also the urban planning ideas, and we left that part to urban developers and urban planners. All of cities created the many years ago by architects, and as in two different disciplines. I think especially the last century, especially city idea ruined by car and fossil kind of the energy things, and then we lost the walkable city idea. All of Asian cities are walkable, and now we started again think about it. How can we make new cities in the city parts walkable?
Yeah.
More humanized. Get rid of all kind of the cars, and there's a new public transportation system and more public spaces. And the architecture learned from the Asian cities,
yes,
100 years ago, and then started creating the new modernist idea. And then now we have 30 planets and many problems, and now we start again to think about it. How can we get them again, that ideas. And for example, Istanbul, and there's a very old city, and also Moscow is suffering about traffic jam and traffic problems, and new public transportation system. Even Istanbul has a chance, you know, using the water, and very low density use water, and mainly by car everywhere.
Right. How about this issue of character? Sergei brought up the issue, like when he says when it comes to Istanbul, you can feel. How would you, if you went to a place like Tashkent or?
It's walking.
How do you feel? Do you think character is through walking?
Area, especially in the old cities, all cities are walkable first of all, right?
Yes.
Without the car, you know, even today in Rome, there is no pathways and sidewalks, and even sidewalks and the carway separate the people.
Mm.
And we are thinking in the next generation without the sideway, maybe all Berlin, you know, and also all Moscow, and also all Istanbul had this kind of character.
Right.
We needed this kind of old new, let's say, character.
But you said at the same time, you know, there's not so much.
I'm not talking about the architecture. First of all, the ground floor. The architecture starts from first of all the ground floor. What is your 000 called?
Right. The architecture, you know, both of you have practices that are, as again, I focus on this term, the Eurasian geography. You know, starting from, let's say, Eastern Europe. I mean, you have work in the Balkans, and you work in Eastern Europe, and that can be considered Eastern Europe. It's a little bit Central Europe. And then always going across Urals and Turkey, Anatolia. This is a very unique geography and has been going through various phases, wild capitalism and then this kind of statist mentality now. In terms of the future, if you had to pick out like some keywords for this area in terms of its future development, cities in this geography, what are 4 or 5 keywords that would be important for you in the development of these cities and architecture in these kind of newly developing Eurasian centers?
I would come more maybe to 2 keywords: human scale, because I think not the human scale is only local city. Of course, you are right. If you walk, you can touch the house, you can touch your surroundings, but relationship to the human scale is also the decision about the height of the buildings and about the density. If you ask my last question about the heritage of eastern towns, like for example Shanghai or Hong Kong, like this, we can be sure that if you go, if walkable or not, if you go through the streets of Hong Kong or Shanghai, you are related every time with another scale if you used to be related in European town. That's, I think, the most difference. The following of spaces, the regulated following of spaces, street, square, small pocket park, and then private space where you are belonging only to your courtyard because you are living in this block. These all qualities are not there in the town. They are only just solid buildings staying in the park. We have a lot of walkable city. The town, what Corbusier wanted to have in his book, in the time where towers were white, what means? You have one big building, a lot of green space, and another big building. So in this city, you would have a lot of walkable space and a lot of green. but it's still for me no quality because you wouldn't have a human space and human scale in the city. At the same time, the same Corbusier criticized New York as a town related to cars, because the streets are going exactly through and coming not in the square and turning around like in traditional European town. But I still think New York is for me, very nice town to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Still, if I go as a neighbor to cars,
Yes.
quite wide pedestrian ways, but still I'm a neighbor of a lot of cars.
Yes. Although they're trying to eliminate the cars.
Well, but they don't do it, and they have no time and no space, and maybe also no money to do that because it's very difficult and long and so on. So you go along the cars, and frankly speaking, I think it's right. You have to be neighbor of all positions of movement
Right.
we have now in the time. But we have still wide way for pedestrians, and we have your facades are maybe 10 floors or some human scale of the floors, maybe even less. It would be nice if it would be 8 floors, for example. And behind them you have tower. So your first discussion is a human scale.
Right.
Is this human scale, and then you don't have green long way, but then you have a lot of green. That's also a type of European town, a type of human scale. And
So
I think it's completely
Human scale
understandable
and
for me.
urban experience is a key parameter in the architecture.
Yeah, human scale is a key parameter for urban experience, I would say, because if you are connected with unhuman scale immediately,
Mhm.
so you are staying for skyscraper.
Right.
So you can stay for one skyscraper on the pocket park, like also in New York, the fall. But if you stay every time, and you have every time the same imagination, to stay just for very high building. So it's for me in that time already equal how many green I have around. I don't feel the town, and I don't feel
Right.
I don't feel the quality and the character of town at all.
At the human scale, also, whether you're driving slowly in a car or walking, it's possible to read the surfaces of buildings.
It's possible to read the structure of the town, the texture of the town.
Yes. So, Gokhan, in terms of how buildings express themselves and which kind of character they show, what would you think are some of the, going forward, like some keywords for you in terms of how buildings should express themselves at the human scale level? Like what should they express in terms of the surfaces, perhaps even in their visual impact?
Yeah, of course, we design, as an architect, we design for human. I mean, I'm talking about always humanizing the ideas. How can we transfer from different disciplines to architecture? I think the architecture last century especially lost some soul. Like, you know, what is the architecture? Always we discuss that. Architecture is not only the building for me, the lifestyle, life, and the urban idea. The hundreds years ago started to creating the more high density cities, to collect the people for different functions, different programs, and then we lost in the urban scale, urban ideas. I think that each city has different kind of program, function, and speciality. We can't combine all programs in one city. That was a big idea, and then we created the megapoles and the super high density big cities, and then we can't understand. We don't know each other. How can we work together? How can we share together? I think the urban idea, why we would like to live in city for sharing.
Right.
What is the sharing idea?
Yes.
What would we share with the other people? Whereas I'm talking about the two different words. Alone, lonely, being alone or lonely. The city creates the human as a lonely now. But if we work together, live together in the same city, but we can't share anything with
Right. Okay. So
our
this,
neighbors.
the human scale coming together in cities, especially these kinds of growing, developing, emerging cities that still are going through large-scale development, and construction.
Yeah, and the next, and also we are not thinking like Corbusier 50 years ago. It was his idea of only some big title, garden and buildings, and he was, of course, he was a great architect. But today's idea and share our problems all coming together.
Right. Okay.
That's today's the park and walkable city mentality, the mindset
Right.
about the more sharing.
Right. Okay.
Even today, the workplace is totally changed, and even our office, everything is open, everything is sharing. It's not that nobody sit and work only his drawings, and always sharing, discussing, and talking, and sending somebody photographs. And today is an idea, and therefore we are thinking next generation cities.
Right. And I'll get into my last question. In terms of the future,
And we should live.
in terms of future development,
This is lectures.
yeah, that we have just very short, just let's say 4 words or 5 words. Can you define what you feel is a role as a futurist almost of the architect? Is there, because there's now all these people that are futurists and trying to predict things, but the architectures always have this role of trying to create utopic conditions and trying to motivate society in one direction. Today, based on your cultural context being here in this kind of Eurasian area, what do you feel is your role as a kind of strategist for future development of these cities? Do you feel that there's a role for you in that? And what kind of, what would be your priority for these cities? Sergei, if you just
Yeah, I think 2 things. I have to think about if there's any future, so or so for the city we create, or we create more and more temporarily. So because Gokhan spoken about what is changing between the form of living or working today, and this changing is great. In the former time, we were early against co-living, so to live together and work together. Everybody wanted to work in his own cell and on her own cell. And nowadays, we live and we work more or less together.
Right.
And to ask me today, I would say the structure of the town
Right.
should bring the people to work together, to bring the green to grow up in all gardens, what they make together in their own courtyards, and to go on the streets and have a holidays together, and so on and so on. So we have to create some urbanity what brings the people not from each other but to each
together.
other.
Got it.
And that goes, I think, together with human scale,
Right.
with no jealousy, with no identification, where the people can work with each other, can live with each other. They are not fenced, they are not gated from
Right.
each other. That's, I think, the point what now can create on the urban level some future.
Okay. And Gokhan's last word to you, what do you feel is your role as a futurist and as a kind of predictor, and what aspecs of the urban or
I'll
architecture?
return again to your first question, because very, very related. I visited a couple of times and then started some projects in Moscow. It's not exactly me. Moscow is interesting model for me. And then Sergei, another Sergei, is working on different kind of I think the future architecture roles, they do already.
Right. Got it.
And I really appreciate what they do for Moscow, and they created new Moscow.
Right.
And
This is architects are doing
different
this.
architects. Yeah, they're very,
Most of them town planners, but of course we tried.
yeah, but their role is fantastic. And we need the many cities in this kind of the big think tank group.
Right, got it.
And also he created and designed and built a museum in Berlin. Maybe next will be in
Yeah.
Moscow.
Yeah.
Close.
Let's see. And also some new architectural schools, and like they
So knowledge-
the Strelka, right?
Yeah.
Well, we are taking part of the Strelka so far.
Strelka, the
We can
studio
do
is
that,
very
and
very
it's really
powerful.
new, possibilities.
New
structure.
architecture as a model, as a new architecture institute.
So the architects, as future planners, need to be involved in architecture education more, and need to be also focusing on creating new
parks
planning and
yeah.
okay. Thank you very much. This was Gokhan Avcioglu and Sergei Tchoban in Istanbul on September 20.
And Gokhan Karakus.
And Gokhan Karakus. Today's September 20. 28. Today's 18th. Today's 18th, really? September 18th. Istanbul. Gokhan Avcioglu, Sergei Tchoban, Gokhan Karakus at Gad Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you.